Alright, this is my slide guitar primer lesson. We are getting started doing a little bit of slide. We're going to be playing in open D tuning today. There's actually a number of tunings you can use to play slide, and you can even play slide in standard tuning, and we'll do a little bit of each, but this is just kind of an easy way to get you in and playing a little bit. Now, the first thing is the tuning. Starting on the very first string here. Now what we're going to be having are the strings going D for the first string. The second string is A. The third string is F sharp. Fourth string is D, as usual. Fifth string is A. And then the sixth string is back to D. What this does, this basically makes one big open D chord. You just strum the whole thing and it's a D. So once again we have D from the first string, A, F sharp, D, A, and then D. Now, one of the reasons why I'm tuned to D is because I've actually got pretty heavy strings on this guitar. One problem a lot of people have when they play slide is they push too hard on light strings. Like if you're playing on an electric and you've got 9 gauge or 10 gauge strings, it's real easy to fret the strings out. I've got 12 gauge strings on this guitar, and then I tune down to D and it's kind of a nice big sound. And the heavier strings, they bring the action up a little bit, they give me kind of a nice fat sound. You know, it's kind of works real well for this. You don't necessarily have to do this. Usually it helps to have one guitar that's kind of your slide guitar. It's just kind of set up for whatever tuning you like to play in, and maybe the action is a little higher with some heavier strings. The heavier string also supports the slide a little bit better, so you can actually get a firm sound without fretting it out or actually pushing down so hard that the slide is resting on the fretboard. When you play slide, you know, the slide is actually riding on the string. You're not pressing down so hard that you're fretting notes, because that kind of defeats the purpose of it. What you're doing is you're just resting the slide on the string at the note you want to hear. If I want to hear, for instance, this A, which is the 12th fret on the second string, I'll take the fret and I'll put it right over the 12th fret. Right here is the point. You don't want to put it where you'd put your finger, because when you put your finger there, what happens is that the note is stopping here, right at the crown of the fret, and what vibrates is the crown of the fret to the bridge saddle. Well, when you're using the slide, your slide is actually the fret. Now, if you just put a slide on a note, pretty dead and dull sounding. One thing that really helps is a little bit of vibrato. Now, vibrato is a little tricky with slide. You want to kind of go back and forth nice and evenly. Now, if you notice, I've got my slide on the third finger. I used to wear it a lot on the fourth finger, so that way I'd have more fingers to play chords with. But the reality for me, as I get a little bit bigger sound, a little bit more direct, and it's a little bit easier for me to control, especially with the vibrato. The one thing I did like about having the slide on the fourth finger is that I could actually fret notes behind the slide, kind of like Sonny Landreth does, and I've got more fingers to do that. It's a little bit easier. Where what's happening is you're fretting the chord, and then you're pushing. I'm kind of pushing out of tune, but when you push the string down behind the slide, it actually goes underneath and it frets on that fret, as opposed to being, you know, it goes lower than the slide's going to fret out. Something to kind of talk about a little bit later, but that's the reason why I've got it on this finger. Some players, like I think I've seen Bonnie Raitt, will use her middle finger. For me, it's kind of difficult to control. It just, you know, it's a little bit easier that way, because I can actually use the whole hand to move. Alright, so if you take your slide and you just hit all the strings at the 12th fret, you get a D chord. Now, notice I don't use a pick here. A lot of the time I'm using my right hand to actually rest on the strings and control them. If you just were to use a pick and everything just kind of smears together. What I'll do, let me move a little bit so you can kind of see the right hand a little bit better. You know, is I'll actually kind of have this grip right here where my fingers are kind of sitting on the strings like this. And a lot of the soloing that I do is ring finger here, middle finger here on the second string, first finger on the third string, and then my thumb gets a lot of the other stuff. But they sit on the strings. They keep them from ringing while the slide's moving around. All right. The other thing is that I'll, like, whatever fingers are behind the slide, I'll usually have it sitting, like the whole hand kind of moves together. That gives you kind of a nice, tight, clean sound. You don't want anything ringing that the listener's not supposed to hear, and that's usually the biggest problem most people have when they first start playing slide is the controllability. Yeah. So far we've talked about the slide actually not pushing down too hard with it. A little bit of vibrato helps warm things up quite a bit. And the vibrato is just moving the slide back and forth. You want to almost think that the center, like where that fret is, that's where the note is. And you're going a little sharp this direction and a little flat that direction. And you're just going back and forth over it. And the center of that back and forth motion is where it's in tune. That's real important. With the slide, you can't blame your guitar if it's out of tune, you know, because you should be able to listen, use your ears, and see if it makes sense with the backing, like if you're playing over some chords. So we'll talk a little bit more about intonation a little bit better. So we've talked about this hand a little bit. We've talked about controlling things with this hand. Now, just for a real simple getting you started thing, for a blues, if we're playing blues in D, your one chord, obviously you can hit all the strings open. You can hit the 12th fret with the slide. The 4 chord, which would be G in the key of D, is actually the 5th fret. And the 5 chord would be the 7th fret, which would be A. Alright, so that's actually in the notation there. I'm giving you a bunch of odds and ends today, not really a piece of music, and then probably in the next lesson or two we're actually going to have some music to put together where you can use all this stuff. Today it's all about just some basics.